You want to know what the source of my power is? I am the source of my power. Foolish traveler, do not be so bold. Today on the Comic Book Report, Disney villains Maleficent from Dynamite Entertainment. Stick around and check it out. Greetings everyone, my name is Dominic and today you're tuning in to the Comic Book Report, where we review comic books and graphic novels so you can get an idea of what to read. And today I'm ecstatic to be talking about a Disney-based property released over at Dynamite. This is one of the Disney villain series. This is of course Maleficent. This is one I saw solicited for a while. I saw covers show up online. And ultimately I heard there would be a collected edition, and here we are. As a huge Disney fan, I am very grateful I had an opportunity to read this book, and I'm really excited to review it today. Before we jump in though, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to all of those at Dynamite Entertainment for sending this copy over for the review. And with that said, let's go ahead and dive in. First, some quick facts about today's collection. The issues in this volume were written and illustrated by Soo Lee. The comics in this volume were published by Dynamite Entertainment beginning in 2024. As far as what this edition collects, the volume includes Disney Villains Maleficent issues 1 through 5. And finally, this is a digest-sized hardcover edition with nice glossy print paper stock, a glued binding, and a total of 144 pages. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and issue a general spoiler warning. I will be flipping through the contents of today's collection and commenting on plot points throughout. You've been advised. Okay, and here's our first look at that Maleficent hardcover from Dynamite Entertainment. So first and foremost, I will say this is a digest-sized hardcover. When I say digest-size, I do mean it is smaller than a standard size release, so your single issue comics, things like that. This is a bit shorter in just about every dimension. In a little bit, I'll go ahead and compare it to a standard size trade paperback so you can get an idea for scale and kind of what I'm talking about. Looking at the spine, we have a nice field of, teal or something color-wise. We have some great fonts, a lot of white kind of text. We have the publisher, title, creator, things like that. All pretty standard here. I do like the look of it. It's very crisp and it looks good on a bookcase. On the back of the hardback, we do have a description of the book, a couple of the accolades or reviews. We have the publisher, pricing information, and a rating of teen on the back. I think this is due to the kind of darker edge of this series. It does, of course, follow a Disney villain. I didn't personally find it to be too explicit, but maybe it's not advised for little ones. As always, reader discretion advised. And if you couldn't tell, this hardcover edition does not include a dust jacket. It's just the hardback book itself. And now for all wondering, here is a quick look at the binding for this hardcover. As I mentioned, I believe this is a glued binding. There's perhaps a little bit of gutter loss, but nothing too critical. It is a smaller collection, and overall, I don't have any real complaints on the binding here. One possible note, it's not really a drawback, but the binding is a little bit tighter. I am curious to see if it loosens up more after subsequent readings. And now, as promised, I am going to do a little bit of size comparison here. I'm going to compare it to a standard size trade paperback, also from Dynamite Entertainment. This is the Darkwing Duck Foul Play collection here. I am reviewing this for the channel as well. I'm not really sure exactly when I'm releasing these videos. This might be coming, or it might have been recently released, so definitely stay tuned if you're interested in that title. But as you can see, this edition is a bit smaller in every dimension. So a standard size release like the Darkwing Duck trade paperback here is about the exact size as a single issue comic book. So the Maleficent collection here is smaller than a just standard single issue. I still found this edition to be very readable. There was no real drawback here. It's just worth noting, especially if you have these all lined up on a bookcase or something, you are looking at an edition that is a bit of a step down as far as size. But for what it's worth, I do think it is well and beautifully constructed. I love the cover design. I do think the hardback is striking. It's a little bit glossy. It is pretty well put together here. Again, just a little bit of smaller dimensions. Okay, now that we've gone over that, it's time to jump into the book proper. So as we make our way in, we have some nice kind of black end pages, title page, we have kind of the creator breakdown page, publication information. I really do like this as well. We have kind of chapter breaks with beautiful art, kind of a little like blurb or kind of quote, I should say, and then we jump right into the issue. And we do have each of the covers reproduced right after these chapter breaks, which is always really fantastic to see. So as we make our way in, exactly what can you expect for Disney villains Maleficent? Well, honestly, I wasn't really sure exactly how this was marketed or exactly what this series was supposed to be. Again, I am a longer-term Disney fan. I love all the original kind of movies and Disneyland and all things like that. Maleficent is a character that obviously gets a lot of play as a huge big bad villain in the Disney universe. Of course, she comes from Sleeping Beauty, and I wasn't sure if this would tie in with Sleeping Beauty itself, if we were going to get something like a prequel, almost like the Maleficent film, or where or exactly when in the continuity this would all take place. Is this completely standalone? Are they planning to sequelize it? And I don't have a ton of answers with that. I'm not sure if there's going to be more in this line. I do believe it's fairly self-contained at this point. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong. But what we have here is, I would say, maybe a prequel of sorts. You know, we do have Maleficent still in power, and this collection really gives us a sequence of little short stories or vignettes that are all connected by a central inciting incident that begins in issue 1. And what is that incident exactly? Essentially, a young prince in a local kingdom kind of runs away from home after being chastised or punished, and he comes across Maleficent, and he's completely awed by her power and of course a little bit nervous. Before he's kind of banished or sent away, he does ask for a token having met her, and Maleficent gives him a compass that's going to point him to his true desires. This, however, ends up being his undoing, as he uses the compass to find Maleficent to try to steal her mage's staff, believing that to be the source of her powers. This overstep, of course, does not go unnoticed by Maleficent, who says she is, in fact, the source of her powers. And as a kind of means to curse him for his impudence, she transforms him into kind of a fox-looking little wolf kind of creature to just run through the woods. He's no longer a prince. He's been turned into this beast who can always go on these adventures off by himself. And that's essentially the premise and overall shape of the first issue in this collection. Across the subsequent issues, we have an appearance by his brother, another prince in the land, looking for this lost brother. Maleficent ultimately toys with this brother and then ultimately reveals the truth of what she did. This, of course, enrages the brother, who really tries to go at Maleficent. From here, we have a couple issues that go into kind of local kingdoms, sending a knight to try to fight off Maleficent, ultimately sending a kind of good witch or sorceress to kind of battle Maleficent in a good versus evil kind of story. And we have an issue somewhere in the middle there where her second in command, this like raven, basically goes through the kingdom and just kind of flies around. There's not a ton of dialogue in that issue, but it gives us the lay of the land, and it's just kind of an interesting filler sort of issue. But that is the overall shape or plotline of this book. At every turn, Maleficent does have the upper hand. She stops both princes, she stops the knight, and she stops this kind of good witch from kind of reaching her ends. Maleficent is shown to be, if not all-powerful, certainly undaunted overall. And while this is not necessarily a bad thing, I do think we lost out on opportunities to get some character growth or kind of just dynamics here. I think that Maleficent comes across, even though she is the central character, she comes across very static as a character. I don't really feel like she's changed from the beginning of this story to the end, and I think the overall quality of this work felt a bit rudderless, or I'm not really sure what the direction was here. We never really had any moment of growth or change. You know, you have the Maleficent film that really goes into this character and makes her deeply tragic and borderline misunderstood. And even in Sleeping Beauty, you have her perhaps not growing as a character, but you at least have her played against some of the central characters where the plot lines are moving forward. And the characters we're introduced to in this story are certainly memorable and interesting, but I don't really feel like they were given enough of of the spotlight, it really is centered on Maleficent, and that's well and fine, but when the character is so static, I just really found myself asking, what exactly was the point of this story? When is this even set? Why does this have any real significance to me? Because I think ultimately what it felt like is just a couple little snapshots into the world of Maleficent, but it didn't really go anywhere. I don't really feel like the story had a really pronounced arc. And again, it's not a bad thing, but I think I would have hoped for a bit more, a bit of a climax or a beginning, middle, and end, and I never really felt that. I felt like each of these were kind of standalone and loosely connected by that initial prince who was turned into the fox, but I never really feel like we went anywhere. And I think if there was a volume 2 or more announced where we got to see more of these threads build and maybe these characters come back and become more of a threat, I think I would have been more entertained. But because I'm not sure if there's a future in sight for this Disney Villains Maleficent line, I'm just left feeling a bit like I was looking for a little bit more. Now, that being said, this is not necessarily a bad work. The art throughout from Soo Lee is absolutely exceptional. Maleficent is absolutely recognizable right from the jump, but there is kind of a stylization or artistry to her we don't have in the pages of Sleeping Beauty, or at least certainly not in this way. And I do really like the vision of Maleficent and this overall realm we get from Soo Lee. I do think it's absolutely gripping and captivating. Along with that, going back to the plot side of things, I do think something that should be commended about this collection that Soo Lee did here is the kind of folklore, fable quality to it. We have these animal characters, we have kind of moralistic lessons in some of the issues, and I do think that that should not be overlooked. I think it was done very intentionally, but really maturely as well. I really enjoyed it. It reminded me of reading like a Grimm's fairy tale at its best, and again, I did like that quality to it, and maybe that was supposed to be the overall feel for the book. Maybe I didn't need an overall story arc as much as these little kind of interconnected fables. And again, if that is the aim, perhaps I should esteem this a bit higher. I think I just would have liked to see that in the context of a better story arc. But yeah, still really impressed here. I really did enjoy the collection overall. At the end of the book, as you just saw, we had a full variant cover art gallery that was all thumbnailized. We got to see so many of the covers reproduced in small scale. We got a breakdown of who created each variant cover, which I really enjoyed seeing. I love seeing the art from Jay Lee in particular as a cover artist. Really beautiful stuff here. We have a solicit for another Disney Villains line, and that really is Disney Villains Maleficent. And now all that's left is to give this collection a grade. For this enchanting visual treat that really at its best promoted this feeling of old school fables or folklore, even if the plot was a little bit middling for my taste, the Comic Book Report is happy to give Disney Villains Maleficent a C+. This is a collection I think would have been improved by a much more dynamic story arc with some characters that had some dimensionality. I would have also loved to see this in a standard size or oversized edition. I do still think this is an above average collection. I do think that there was some thought and care put into this. Soo Lee is such a gifted artist, and I would have just liked to see more fleshed out here in this world. While I wouldn't necessarily rate this for young kids, I do think any Disney fan out there would probably enjoy the ride. But I would love to hear, as always, what do you think of Disney Villains Maleficent? Have you read the book we reviewed today? Did I miss the mark? Do you have other comments? I'd love to hear all of that. Have you read any of the other Disney Villains line here from Dynamite? I'd be interested in hearing that too. To everyone who's made it this far in today's review, I just want to say a hearty thank you, and I'd like to extend that thank you again to those at Dynamite Entertainment for sending this book in exchange for a review. And until next time, this has been the Comic Book Report. Please don't forget to give this video a like, a comment like we talked about, and maybe check out another video on your way out. Thanks everyone, and have a good one.